Today's conversation is with David Schnurman, CEO, author, speaker, podcast host, and the author of 11 Suitcases. But this episode is not really about a book. It's about a moment a successful person realizes that achievement and aliveness are not always the same thing. David built a business, he wrote books, he created freedom, he led, he produced, he succeeded. And still, underneath all of that, there was a question many driven people eventually face. Am I actually living the life I keep thinking about? In this conversation, David shares the story of moving his family from Brooklyn to Barcelona with 11 suitcases, 3 kids, and no guarantee that the leap would work. What started as a simple desire to help his children sleep eventually became a family mission, a radical act of intentionality, and a reminder that life does not always change through one dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it changes because you write down what matters. Sometimes it changes because you say yes. Sometimes it changes because you realize the ship can still turn. We talk about family, fear, travel, ADHD, freedom, legacy, midlife, success, and the quiet discomfort of being a driven person who still feels stuck. This is a conversation for anyone who's built a life that looks good from the outside, but still feels a pull towards something more honest, more alive, and more fully lived. Here's my conversation with David Schnurman. David Schnurman, welcome to the Personal Success Podcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Who is David and what is his mission?
Still trying to figure that out, but I'm a work in progress for sure, as we all are, I'm sure, a little bit. Let's see. So as I was briefly sharing with you, before this call in the past couple of weeks, I've been re-looking at my purpose. And for years, I've been very, over a decade, I felt very confident that I know what my purpose is. And I use a very general phrase, which is my purpose is to inspire and empower people to live their life to their fullest. I wrote my first book in 2019 called The Fast Forward Mindset. It was directly associated with that. I wrote my second book in 2026 called 11 Suitcases, again, geared towards that. But when I read this book, it really focused on what is my pain point that I had to solve that was my worst pain point, and how can I help other people through that? And when I really tried to examine where it was most painful for me, it was realizing that I'm a driven person who many times gets stuck. And I've figured out a way to move from being stuck to thinking about something, to helping people to actually living it, like moving abroad for 2 years, becoming president of YPO, running my business. And so my purpose and why I'm here and why I'm talking to you today is to help driven people who feel stuck in their life in some form, move from thinking about what they want to do to actually living it. And that's what gives me energy. Any way that I can help, and I still feel stuck in many areas, any way I can help people do that is important to me.
I can't help but be drawn to this question, David. You became more aware of where you were stuck through this process of looking at your purpose.
Yeah. So it had me look into painful moments in my career, in my growth. And I think there's 2 components to that. It's one, every time I hit an area of where I think it should be successful, the background conversation in my head is I'm not, or I should be here or there, or I'm not exactly sure where to take it. And too often, right? It's I don't know, you call it imposter syndrome, you call it other areas. Too often, most people get stuck there. They take action, they get out of their comfort zone, and then imposter syndrome happens and all these other reasons happens, and they don't follow through with what they're trying to do. And I'll just use the example of moving to Barcelona, and they just say it was an idea, but they never take action on it. And so I think I figured out how to get over that imposter syndrome, take action, and execute on things, even when I'm unsure about them, especially when I'm unsure about them. And the other thing in the book that was really helpful, it was to come up with one word that embodies you and your who. And my one word that I ended up coming up with was conviction, not because I always have it, because I'm always searching for it. And so the more conviction I have in my life, if I look back in 20 plus years, 30 plus years, the happier I will feel and the more fulfilled I will be, versus things that I want to do, but I'll be regretful if I don't actually execute on them.
So much there that I relate with, David. So, you talked about this book. You just released it in February, 11 Suitcases. As far as I can tell, it's about your family's move to Barcelona and what led up to that. Who is the book for? And what can somebody who reads it expect to sort of get out of it?
So there's several audiences to the book. The most specific audience is parents in midlife who feel like they are stuck on a course and they're not happy in that course, or they don't think they can turn their ship to do something else, especially with young kids. Secondly, anybody who feels stuck or like they want to take a leap and they're not sure how to. And don't get me wrong, there's a million books about this. This is the age old, this has been going on since the beginning of humans, right? But my story is unique and different because what we did is it started, I don't know how far back you want to go, but just it started with me trying to solve one problem. In 2015, I had 3 kids, 6 and under. And the problem that I was trying to solve is how to put them to sleep at night because they weren't going to sleep. Trying to solve how to get my kids to sleep led to me moving to Barcelona, if you could believe that.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time drawing the connection to that. You might have to help me, David.
Good. No. So thank you for following up. So the first thing was I went out to my network and I started asking them, friends, any advice, people who had other kids. Somebody recommended a book called 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. The author of that was Patrick Lencioni, who also wrote the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So he had credibility, New York Times bestseller. He also had 4 kids. And what was so powerful about that book, he took everything that I've learned in business, mission, core values, priorities, and applied that to your family, which I've never thought about doing. And I was like, oh, that's a kind of cool exercise. And one of the exercises he had us do, and I did it with my wife and the twins at the time who were 6, was sit around the table and write out 1, what is unique about your family? And 2, where do you see yourself in 10 years from now? And so we did that and we said what we want to be: self-confidence, have a sense of humor, be happy. And I said travel, just because I love to travel. But at least back when I was in my 20s with my wife, we turned that into a paragraph. We want to do this, this, and this, and experience our life through travel. That's where we wanted to see ourselves in 10 years. And the reason it relates to putting your kids to bed, in the book, it said, in order to get through your day-to-day, the struggles of like putting your kids to bed, you need to have something inspiring to look forward to of where you're trying to get to. So that's how putting kids to bed ended up with that phrase. Then I started telling everybody, we have this mission. We want to do this, this, and this, and experience our life through travel. I was eventually introduced to somebody in 2015, 2 months after we wrote that, who just came back from living in Barcelona with his family for a year. Because I told him about this mission and he told me about it. It took 4 years of him telling me about it, 12 meetings, lunches, dinners, our wives getting together. Then finally in 2019, fate and timing all worked out. And we decided to take that leap of faith and go from what felt like a pipe dream to packing 11 suitcases and getting on a plane to Barcelona. So does that answer the question on how it was?
Absolutely it does. So there were 11 suitcases, but why choose that title for the book?
Fantastic question. Because have you ever written a book?
No.
Okay. Writing a book, it took 5 years. I started and stopped 12 times. And I gave up more than I started it. Then you're done with the book. Then you got to figure out the title. That was so freaking hard. And I went through a million different iterations. I went on ChatGPT and Claude. I spoke to so many people. And the original title of the book was going to be The Year We Said Yes. And let me just see if I can get here. I'm still here.
Sure.
So the original title of the book was going to be The Year We Said Yes. 2 reasons we didn't do that. And it ended up turning to chapter 2, and I'll explain why if you want me to. But the reason we didn't do that, I found out later there was a book by Sandra Rhimes called The Year of Yes. And that was a New York Times bestseller, a huge book. And I didn't want to sound too close to that. And when I would tell people to that, many people were like, oh, is that the year you got married? Like, what is that about? The reason it ended up turning into 11 Suitcases, I had decided the photo that I wanted to use on the cover was this photo, regardless of what the title was going to be. The photo is us at Delta, the day we were leaving, with all of our suitcases behind us. What you see behind us superimposed is our view from our terrace in Barcelona. And that's an iconic view. And that's the iconic street. So I was showing the picture to so many people and like, I love the photo of you guys, but I wish the suitcases weren't all over it. You know, I wish they weren't there. Then light bulb. Well, the suitcases were a huge part of the story. In fact, the day we were leaving, I had these 4 huge duffel bags that I was going to take. I called up Delta. They turned out they were all too big to take on the plane. Literally 4 hours before the flight, I'm buying these new suitcases. So we all know how hard it is to pack on a small trip. Now imagining packing for a year to 2 years of your life. So that's how it ended up at 11 suitcases.
So was the trip supposed to be just, you were moving there for 2 years? Was that intentional up front?
So it was actually supposed to be a year. And then 7 months in, something, you might have not heard of it. It might have not had, sorry, it's my humor, but COVID happened while we were there.
What? Oh.
So that completely, obviously transformed our experience and our trip. And it became pretty clear it made so much more sense to stay an extra year than to go back to New York.
What I'm most curious about is that you're not in Barcelona now. You look back. What is it that you left Barcelona with that you didn't have when you got there?
So yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate question, right? And we are transformed as a family. And I'll answer that question without trying to give you like too much of what happened while we were there. And we can kind of circle back to that. We went there with the goal to experience life through travel, right? Like that was the big goal. And obviously living in Barcelona was a big part of that. And then you're in Europe and you're close to Africa and you're close to all these places. So we were on a mission. Before COVID hit, we were traveling every weekend, to so many different places, whether in Spain or outside of Spain. And our kids at that time, they were 10, 10, and 6 when we moved. It wasn't part of who we were. As we left and we came back to the US, we were very intentional about who we were and what we wanted to be. And we made a commitment that, sorry. No, it's emotional.
I'm sorry.
You know, when someone coughs, you can't, it's like when someone sneezes, you can say, excuse me. When they cough, you just got to sit there and listen, I guess. I don't know. I'll keep going.
Yeah, please. Sorry about that, David.
So when we came back, we made a commitment to continuing to do these big adventurous travels. And to me, the biggest transformation was our kids are now the ones who are looking to see where we want to go next. What's the big adventure where we're going? And we don't, very challenging, exciting trips. And to me, it's the kids who are looking to travel and experience new things will be the adults who will be like, why should we limit ourselves in life? Because I see a direct correlation to that. And so that to me, like transforming who we were and like the 10-year vision, we were intentional about it. We put it in writing and a couple things happened in our first 6 months while we were there that put us on this path. But it's a very clear sort of story of like, if you're intentional, it allows you to get through the fear and the doubts, which we had throughout the trip. Of course, COVID helped accelerate some of those as well.
Sure. What were some of those fears and doubts that you had?
When we moved there, obviously it was an amazing first few weeks. You're in Barcelona. We started traveling right away. But if I had to be honest, I had a little bit of a imposter syndrome. I started meeting expats from all over the world or all over Europe. This was like their 6th country they were in. And, you talk to them and they're like, oh, where have you traveled? Where are you from? I'm like, well, I came from Brooklyn and I guess we were only in Brooklyn. And it was just like, whatever. And then there was this one night at the school where it was an event for new parents and kids. And the dean gave his speech. And I felt like this speech, he was like talking directly to me. And in the speech, he said, during the course of this year, as new parents, you're going to feel like the new kid in high school or middle school where you don't know where to sit. But you're going to be invited to things. You're going to be asked to join WhatsApp groups, to go on to trips to cities you can't pronounce, to do hiking groups, to join a book club that reads in Spanish. He goes, whether you're tired, whether you want to stay home and take out, you have one job. And your one job is to say yes. Because by saying yes is how you get the most out of your mess and the magic of being in Barcelona for the year. And that just kind of reframed my thinking. Because as he was saying that, I was thinking about all the times I said no in Brooklyn. And so to me, when we started saying yes, it helped us because every time I say yes, just every trip I go on to the T, as an example, I'm like, what about the issue with this? Or like, maybe there's going to be that or that. And so I always have fear or struggle or not knowing what to pack. And so by having that intentionality to say yes is one example to your question of how we were able to overcome some of those fears while we were living there.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting to look. I went through the reviews on the book, and there's a lot of really great reviews, but several of the reviewers mentioned how honest you were about how messy and un-Instagrammable parts of the moving abroad with the kids was. And I just wonder, was there a low point that you sort of considered, you know what, this is not going to go in the book. We're leaving this out, like a story that's on the cutting room floor?
Every day. So thank you for reading the reviews and doing that. I appreciate that. And I have a lot of friends. But so I'll tell you this, like when they were 6, we were having trouble putting them to sleep. The twins, and our youngest was 1. When we moved 4 years later, the twins were 10 and our youngest was 6. And we were still struggling. So let me tell you, when you move 6,000 miles away, if you're struggling at home, it's only going to get more challenging when you're trying to learn a new culture, learn a new language. And I can't tell you how many times, we're in the same basic things. You're in a car, the kids are fighting, no one's listening. I'm turning back, screaming at them. We're in a windy road in the middle of the mountains. And to some degree, every time that happened, obviously kids shouldn't have done that. We did that. But my wife and I, Kelly, we realized we were just, because we wanted to get the most out of it, we pushed our luck a lot. And so that example that I gave you, what we realized was the kids hadn't eaten in like 5 hours. We were like on the 4th journey of a leg and we couldn't find somewhere to eat. Or they were always fighting. You have 3 kids, it's the middle seat of the car. Like everyone's in that. And of course, COVID hits, it's ironic because we moved to Barcelona to travel. We ended up in the strictest lockdown in Europe. Our kids were not allowed to legally leave our apartment for 51 days. Talk about
I remember that. I remember specifically hearing about like Spain was one of the worst lockdown countries when that initially.
Yeah. So here we're 6,000 miles from family. We're still in a new country. And 2 weeks into the lockdown, the school goes on a week vacation. At least during school, they had something to do every day. So I remember that was the lowest point in the beginning of the COVID. We had a week. We couldn't leave our apartment. And my wife and I were just like, we didn't know what to do. And we were just like depressed and all that. So like all the things that you would expect to happen at home times 10.
What was the impact during that time and just the time in general, as far as the way that you got along with your family? There's something about it. So David, I have twin boys too. They're going to be 3 on Sunday. It's funny. I was the guy who walked around saying, hi, I'll never have kids because I had 5 little brothers and we were, and I was always had to take them to the bathroom and to their friend's house, whatever. And I wasn't interested in having the responsibility of taking care of somebody. But now, I maybe it's because I'm in my mid 40s and I think about, just how valuable it's 3 years. It seems like they were born yesterday. All the cliches are true for me here. How did your relationships transform during the time you spent with them, with your family in Barcelona?
So the book is about family. That's at the end of the day. And it's a great question because you asked me what the takeaway was. The takeaway was this. There's a statistic that I think about, and it's 80% of the time that you spend with your kids are before the age of 18. And 20% that you see them are after that. So those 2 years when we were with them in Barcelona, we spent so much time together in such a rich and amazing way when we were traveling on weekends, when we were learning a new language, when we were obviously stuck in COVID, when we literally were traveling in the summer in Costa Brava and France and San Sebastian. There was no tourists. This was a once in a lifetime situation to travel to these most famous places. And it was just us and locals. And so we got to build these core bonds and life memories that we never would have had if we were in New York or in Brooklyn. And so that's why travel has become such an important component to us. You wonder why one of the things that as you get older, time goes faster, right? And you remember less. One of the reasons is you do a lot less. You don't do as much as you did. You don't have as many new memories. And the hack to create new memories and for time to slow down is to experience life and travel. And it doesn't have to be flying to Barcelona or moving to Barcelona. It can be every city that somebody lives in within 50 miles, there's somewhere special and different. Within 200 miles, there's somewhere they can sleep and do that. And so like doing those type of things with your kids before they're 18 will give them memories that will change who they are, and it will set up a tone for them to do that for the rest of their lives. We gift in travel, not in items.
Yeah. I think there's something powerful in that. And I think that you even said that the kids are the ones looking for the next experience too. So I'm sort of putting together a couple of things, but it seems like, are you looking for less opportunities to travel, or is it the kids sort of driving that now, or is it that drive still alive with you?
No, I'm definitely looking for opportunities to travel.
Good.
Well,
okay.
What I will say is that they're not in the back seat. They're not waiting for us to say, here's what we're doing next. And that's like, if you look at the prologue to the book, and I'll send you a book after this, tell me where to send it.
Yeah.
Is
awesome. Thank you.
It starts off with a real story of my son. He was a junior at the time, saying he wanted to go to Antarctica, and he researched a trip and this is that and whatever. And we're like, okay, like whatever, like maybe like that sounds crazy, but let's look into it. And so while we didn't get to Antarctica in Christmas, we ended up as close as you can in Argentina. We went to Patagonia and El Calafate, pretty close to the border.
Yeah.
And we could, look in the water.
Sure.
That's the type of thing where, and like the trips that we do, they're like 5 plane rides and different things. And there's never, and don't get me wrong, we're exhausted and complaining during each one of these trips, but we are enriching the bonds between us to do that. But like they are saying, like they're graduating high school, they're like, maybe if we could just go to like a beach for a couple of days and do nothing before we start college. So yeah, I mean, again, I recognize talking about travel is a privilege, and especially the type of travel where you're flying to Europe or anywhere else, especially nowadays. And so that's why I just want to reinforce, it's not just about going somewhere far and special. It's just about building new core memories with kids outside of your normal sort of house and neighborhood.
I thought it was interesting that this seems like such a different book from the fast forward mindset that you wrote in 2015.
That I had near me right here.
Yeah, that was close by. Well, I guess you said you sort of started and stopped writing the book several times, but I just wonder, it seems like that type of book that it's, and I haven't read it, I want to be clear, of the fast forward mindset, it's definitely right up my alley. A lot of authors, they sort of stick in that lane, but you didn't. I mean, what is they're two very different books. What caused you to sort of veer in the first place?
I'm going to tell you a secret.
Okay.
They're the same book, just a different story. So, and because I just recently did a presentation, a keynote, and the guy who I'm close with, who's read both books, he's like, this is just another version of the fast forward mindset. And because the fast forward mindset is a formula to be more fearless and focused to accelerate your success. And I kind of shared it with you before without telling you it was the formula. It's about how to take action and not fall back into your comfort zone and find that focus. So the truth is, one of the formulas that we used to move to Barcelona was the template that I built in the fast forward mindset. So it was sort of like, it's not a coincidence that the book was published in 2019 and we moved to Barcelona in 2019. So it was me eating my own dog food. So what the 11 Suitcases, and by the way, the fast forward mindset is it takes 30 of the best self-help books and combines the best stuff together. It takes research, but it also is my story of the first, let's say, 5 to 10 years of building my business. And it talks about how I built it from 0 to 5 million in 5 years. But then over the next 5 years, all the mistakes that happened and all the challenges and all the vulnerabilities. So it's more of a business sort of self-improvement book. The 11 Suitcases is a family self-improvement book. So it's on both sides, but they both are the same story. How do you take a leap, change directions when you feel stuck in a certain area? So they're just that. So that, I hope that helps explain why I didn't really move as far away from the genre as you could. But it is a memoir, so it's a little bit different. And for me, that was about legacy. And at a minimum, my kids are on the cover of a book and they'll have the story for years, for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, it's like the fast forward mindset is the framework. And like you said, it's sort of like what it looks like when you apply it to real life, something like family.
Totally. It's exactly what it is. And
that's awesome.
I wrote the book for me. You write the book you were meant to read.
Yeah.
As an author, I'm a self-help junkie. I can tell you that all the books that are here that I read. And so I wrote this because from a $15 book, I've gotten more ROI than anything else in my life, right? And so what did I tell you in the beginning? My purpose is to help driven people who feel stuck move from thinking to actually living. And that's what the books are. And the problem is I'm going to write 18 books. And I always thought that was a pipe dream. But now with AI, it's totally possible. And they'll actually be AI assisted or AI written, but actually hopefully valuable and good books. I'm already working on 2 more now. In the process of writing a book, if to inspire you to write a book, Ryan, is therapeutic, painful, amazing, terrible, all at the same time. And then you have something that's a legacy for your twins.
Yeah. I mean, that's strong motivation right there. And David, there's probably a half dozen books in my computer that I've started, and it just is never, I don't know. I guess it's like, why wouldn't I go back to them? Why wouldn't I formulate those ideas? Why wouldn't I continue to move forward with that? I don't know.
Well, me too. Like I've so many. And the question I would have is, let me ask you a question if it's okay.
Yeah. Please.
Do you know your purpose?
Yeah, it is kind of this heady thing that I always say, but I want, my purpose really is to help elevate sort of consciousness or awareness of people, And I guess what I mean by that is through, I work as a coach. And I think one of the things that I was just sort of built in with me is that I had this desire to sort of help people sort of manage themselves. And I've just come to know it's just sort of an expansion of your awareness, your consciousness, your knowledge. That really is what is going to help us navigate, humanity's next evolutionary leap.
Yeah. So what I would say is, for me, and maybe you can relate to it as well when you think about why you should write a book, anybody can write about how to elevate awareness and consciousness, but nobody can write about your specific stories and clients that you've worked with, that you don't have to say who the clients are, and you can change the stories and the examples, but using that to help, at least as a first book, is a good sort of approach.
It's funny as I use all those big fancy words and things like that. It's like, what I'm saying is that it's about helping people, helping people be better, right? I mean, that's really what it is. There's just a certain key thing about consciousness that seems relevant to me.
You want to hear something cool? So we got connected through Book Thinkers, which I got connected through somebody else who helped me in my first book. I don't know if have you worked with Book Thinkers before for guests?
Yes.
Okay. Nick, who is the CEO of Book Thinkers, as a thank you for working with them, he's the one who sent me the book package of 5 different books. And the book Built to Serve actually came from him. But it gets even better. I hired them to book me, and I have my own podcast too. I hired them to get me on 10 different podcasts. And then I was done with that. And then I was like, you know what? Do 10 more. And that's where you came in, right? And the reason I did, and I'd say probably 4 to 5 of the people who interviewed me, we've become friends. One of them, I'm doing a monthly sort of book club sort of thing with him. I recommended him this book, Arete, which is an unbelievable book by Brian Johnson. It's like the Bible of everything you need to know about self-help and entrepreneurship, best book ever. So I'm not surprised that me and you have the same purpose and core values, because if you're interviewing people about understanding their story, about how they've motivated others, it's because you relate. And so I can see us connecting as well more in the future. That was my motivation, as much as to get it out there, is to meet cool people and tell my story. And every time you tell your story, it's a good practice, right? I'm connecting neurons in my head. I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I was trying to figure out so many things that you've said. I mean, everything from having twins to this podcast was this idea of I hit 40 and I was like, okay, I did all the corporate things that I wanted to do. I'm not sure, I can go in a book and look up success, but I don't know I don't know what it is, like for me, you know, and that's where this started. It was like, what does it mean? And I was like, what if I just started talking to people about it?
Yeah.
And it sort of took a life of its own. And so that is kind of, just to tie it back to, you know, I think the context of this conversation, it was sort of I didn't know how to talk to people. I don't know what I really based this podcast on. You know, it just was like something that just came from, the only way I knew how to get the truth about something, or something that I would believe is the truth. You know?
Yep. I started my podcast over a year ago. I've done over 115 episodes. It's called Lawyers Who Learn, because I'm in the legal industry. It's very similar to this. It's how do you learn and grow throughout your career? And to me, I feel like a kid in a candy store, because and you're a great interviewer, so I'll give you credit there. Well, I've done interviews where people are they don't know how to follow up. They're not listening to what you're saying. They are asking basic questions, and it's de-energizing for me and for those who are listening. And when somebody asks something and hears what you're saying, and then you're connecting 3 different things and you ask a question there, first of all, I truly believe you're getting smarter when you do it, because this is how you're learning. And I get so much energy from both sides of this conversation that, like I said, I feel like a kid in a candy store, because that's how I learn. If you put me in front of a video that I have to watch for an hour, no shot, which is ironic because that's what my business is. We sell hour videos.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I will inevitably walk out of these conversations that I have, and I will just go and talk to my partner who's just got off work, and she wants to, you know, sort of, you know, she's dealing with the boys and all these things. And I'm just at this, I'm like, this is fun. I'm at a fundamental level of like fulfillment and having these conversations. It's almost like a kid in the candy store. So it's just funny. I relate to what you said there. And I sort of skipped over this question, but I think, you know, it might be something that gets to where this conversation was meant to go. And I think if we zoom out a little bit and you build a life that looks successful on the outside, you're a CEO, a best-selling author, a speaker, a podcast host with Lawyers Who Learn, an adventurer. But when you look beneath all that, all these things that you've done in your life, who is it that David is really trying to become?
Let me start with not necessarily answering directly, with answering something like hopefully will get us there. So, because on my podcast, I used to do it, I stopped doing it, but I said, like, do you have any questions for me to the guests? Because I always feel like I'm going so deep with them, but then I stopped doing it. But one person asked me a question. She's like, you do so much. Like you said, this. She's like, how do you do it all? And what I said to her, because I realized something I learned something fundamental who changed who I am from my 100 interviews. So that's exciting, first of all.
Yeah.
Always said I have undiagnosed ADHD. And I never truly believed it. I never truly understood it. And then I interviewed a couple experts who work with attorneys with ADHD. And one of them explained to me what it is you have a lack of dopamine in your brain. You're always chasing dopamine. You're chasing urgency. That's why you procrastinate and do deadlines. That's why you do things that are challenging and energizing, but like a mundane task is the hardest thing in the world for you to do. And then I actually got diagnosed. I went and I did a test and I actually got diagnosed with ADHD. So that in itself was very helpful, because I constantly felt like bad about myself, that I have all these things I know I'm supposed to do and I'm not doing. What's wrong with me? And then I was like, oh, I'm just wired differently in these areas. And so to go back to your question, when she said, why do you do so much? And I'll explain one thing after that. I said, well, you have to understand, I do all these things because I'm chasing my dopamine rush. And so when I do a new thing, when I go on, especially when I'm on a podcast, dopamine's there, do an adventure, or when I write a new book, or I do anything sort of what's on there, it's because it's new and exciting and it's dopamine heavy. But underneath it all, I overwhelm myself, because one of the other signs is like, it's easy for me to be overwhelmed, and from all the things I have going on as part of the whole situation. And so that's where the stress and anxiety comes from, by doing so many things and then getting overwhelmed by not being able to organize it. And then I had this realization, because you said, I think the question was, what am I trying to become?
Yeah.
Was that it? I think. And so I recently did this exercise, was like, if you can write a title of your book, what would it be? And I wrote Just Below the Surface. And this is before the whole ADHD conversations. And what I thought that was, I was right right, like if that's the surface on the top of your screen, I was about to go through the roof and get to where I always thought I would be. And then after these conversations, what I realized was because of this, I'm actually always feel like I'm in a state of fog when I'm not in that adrenaline dopamine area and I'm struggling, and I always feel like I'm just below the surface. So I guess what I'm trying to become, or I've always tried to become, is somebody who's above the surface and has that clarity. And I think that's why I love the podcast so much, because in this moment, in this conversation, I am above the surface. And I've never said this before. Like this is coming to me as, and many times in my life, I'm below the surface, but here I am me. Put me on an interview, have me talk to a group of 1,000 people, 500 people, I'm above. And so I'm striving to be above the surface in many areas as possible.
So I just want to say for the audience that you and I, we've never met before. And it's funny as I'm listening to your answer, I'm like, I'm not sure that he understands the question. And I didn't see where we were going. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's a great metaphor that I haven't used. It was like, I'm trying to, if I were to answer that, now I have this different context, but if I were to answer that, I'm trying to become the most sort of clear expression of my potential or something. And I just did not see that going there. I completely understand what you're saying there. And I think
I didn't know where I was. I thought I was going to get there, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to. Yeah.
There's a certain, I guess, I didn't have this question prepared or anything, but there's a certain.
Those are the best questions.
There's a certain demeanor that you have, which is sort of like, on one hand, I'm like, this guy's got a lot going on, and there's a lot of surrender that's happened in your life, but at the same time, there's a lot of intention and like. I don't know, like sort of you're going after things. You moved your family to Barcelona, for example, right? But there's also this sort of what will be. I don't know. What am I seeing there?
I once met with the coach, and we were in a forum with like 8 other business executives, and each one of us she interviewed us ahead of time, and then she talked to each one of us individually and as a group. And what she said in that group, and I think this might sort of hold to it, that each person had an extreme of one area. And she said, I was one of the most even-keeled people that she's worked with and met, where I never went to the extreme of too happy or too upset. And I think that's potentially what explains what you just said, because I'm just always sort of like trying, and this is also a lot of, self-improvement work of like, you can't control the outside world. Good thing, bad thing, all the work, all the books that I've written. But I just try to go with the flow and put it there. And the areas where I have the least balance is when I start to compare myself with others, because when you see others who are out there and more successful, whether that's impact, impression, clicks, or money, and I know I could be that person for whether it's ego or impact or other areas. And so that's where I struggle, where I'm like, what am I doing wrong, or what's wrong with me? And then the flip side is like, the part where I'm like, I was like, I couldn't be happier. Like, I actually might not want that stress of having to be on all the time, because I need that. I'm introvert, extrovert, or I need to recharge a lot by myself. But put me in a room where there's a clear topic and focus, I'm great. Put me in a cocktail room where there's nothing, where it's just to meet people. That's very challenging for me.
Yeah.
That's a different topic, but sure, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's so many, that's all right. So many questions come up, and I'm like, okay, let's, we'll keep it within an hour here. That's what we set out here. But I think that
I could go a little over if you want, but I'm okay with an hour as well.
Okay. Well, good to know.
Look, for me, this is for us as much as anybody else. So if it helps us explore our own journeys, let's do it.
Yeah. So there's this idea that I've come up with working with people, and it's sort of a general, you referenced it a little bit when you said, I'm privileged to talk about travel and things like that. And it made me think of this idea, is that when we're sort of, I wonder what you think about this idea, if you've got something adjacent to it or a different maybe value attached to it. But I think when human beings, when we're fully resourced, and I mean, when you feel like you've got a decent amount of time, when you feel like you've got energy, you've got a roof over your head, you've got a little bit of money in the bank, our instinct is to then help each other. First of all, what do you think of that? I don't know that I've really seen this written anywhere as a theory or anything, but it's something that I don't know if it's like rose-colored glasses. I'm sort of coming to have this general belief about human beings overall.
Well, again, just to go back to the book it's called Built to Serve. And the whole purpose of that book was we are built to serve other people. And where we serve them best is the pain point that we have. So, and we all have different pain points. And when you serve other people, it's when you're the happiest to some degree. And that, religion serves that in many different areas. So yeah, I completely buy into that. Of course, there's the Maslow hierarchy of needs that you need to make sure that you have security, food, water, shelter. And once you get through those areas, another quote that he actually said, if I can find it, I'll look it up really quick, but he's like, those who live a life less than they're meant to live will live a life in misery. So the same person who gave the hierarchy of needs also said, if you don't live the life you're meant to lead, you will be miserable.
You write, speak, and teach about accelerating success. Did you come to a point ever, or where you realize that success might also require slowing down enough to sort of re-examine the life you're living?
In the book Arete, it gives you like 451 really great quick stories. And the reason I did 451, because I think 451 was the temperature you needed to create a flame. 450, you can't create a 451. And one of the stories that he gives in the book is two guys in a forest. One has a saw. I guess they both have saws, and one guy's saw is almost completely dull. The other guy stops and sharpens his saw to keep cutting and goes, Brian, stop. You got to sharpen your saw. He's like, no, I'm too busy sharpening it. I can't stop. I'm too busy cutting. I can't stop. Yeah. And of course, the guy who stopped, sharpened, and did it, cut so much more trees down than the guy who did it with a dull saw. Yeah. So it's very important for me to stop and relook at sort of what's going on. And traveling or getting away is part of that. And it's actually built into our culture of our business for everybody. We have a 4-day work week that gives everybody more time than almost every other business. Like my son said to me, he goes, I wish school, every kid has said this, I wish school could be on the weekend and the weekend can be during the week. And I agreed with him. I agree. And I was like, all right, let's see what it looks like to have at least a less work week. And so I'm constantly trying to reflect and look at the next part of our lives. And so the next thing I need to do is we just hit that 10-year vision of where we wanted to see our family. Before my twins go to college, I need to sit down with them and redo that family conversation of where we see ourselves in 10 years from now, because that's when things get interesting. I'll be an empty nester. And I don't know what else the world looks like, but certainly it'll be interesting.
Yeah. So if it's all right, I just want to talk about Lawline a little bit.
I mean, that's my business. Would love to.
So first of all, how did this come about?
Two parts to that. 2004 or 5, I was in law school. I started like the first podcast. It was actually on public access TV, and YouTube came out, and I put it on there. And guess what I was doing? I was interviewing entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to start my own business. One of the first entrepreneurs I interviewed was actually Simon Sinek, who of course now has become the Simon Sinek.
Wow.
And that's when he first came out with the why. And I was connected with him to somebody else. And I was like, holy smokes, this guy's amazing. And then I had this idea of like, instead of just interviewing entrepreneurs, what if I interviewed attorneys? Because I was in law school, and I turned those interviews into courses. And because continuing legal education courses, because those were mandatory. And this was an idea my dad had tried maybe like 6 years earlier, but never really worked out to where he wanted it to. So I was like, he tried this. I think he was just a little bit too early. Why don't I try again? And that was the birth of what Lawline is today.
So basically is it for continuing education credits for lawyers, right?
Correct. There's 1 million attorneys in the country. 800,000 or so of them have to take about 12 hours a year. And we make it so easy and affordable and high quality and effective and engaging way to take it online.
Wow, that's incredible. And so I'm reading a lot about like online courses, but this is different. So I was reading about how online courses aren't like as much of a thing anymore, but I guess with continuing education credits, that's going to be a little bit different. But, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs sort of, you know, maybe you run into this because I think some lawyers would fall into sort of they have their own business and whatnot, but entrepreneurs, they hold up this value of like freedom a lot of the times, but they build lives they can't step away from, right? It's kind of like the guy continuously, you know, sawing the tree. Maybe it was Barcelona, or maybe just, you know, in your journey of reflection, what you've learned about how to have that value of freedom. How do you use that in your business? You mentioned 4-day work weeks, but what does that look like?
First of all, it's a great question because freedom of my time has always been the most important thing for me above anything else. So I took that value and I put it forward not only to myself, but to my employees and also to our customers, like freedom for their time. So the fast forward mindset was specifically the story of how I built that freedom as an entrepreneur. And the reason I was able to do it, and actually I was really proud, there's 2 books and coaching groups that are out there that you might know. One is Scaling Up and one is EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System. Both of those authors I became friendly with and they actually gave me testimonials for my book on the front page. And the whole purpose of that book is like, I'm the visionary, and I built a team of integrators and other executives who run the day-to-day, and I focus on where we are and where we're trying to go. Yeah. And by doing that and building that structure of priorities, vision, core values, culture, I was able over the period of years to take myself out of the center to the periphery to help move things forward. And in so doing, I was able, and it was a risk, but I was able to move to Barcelona before remote was really a thing. I was the only one, except for one other person, who was remote in my company at that time until COVID hit, and then we all went remote. So that I had to take if we didn't move to Barcelona in 2019 with our kids, it was that or never, or when you're 65, which is not what my goal was. So the risk was everything can go wrong in the business. Things can implode. Then we moved back. Not an easy thing, not pleasant, but you could. That was the what I said to myself if we had to.
So what do you hope is the legacy of 11 Suitcases?
There's 2, right? One is for my kids and my family, that they did something different and unique and special, and they're going to continue to do different, unique, and special things for the rest of their lives. I didn't go abroad until I was, I lived abroad when I was a junior, but like the thought of like moving somewhere else. I live in Brooklyn. I pretty much lived in Brooklyn almost all my life, except for when I was in New York, Manhattan. I gave them experience to live somewhere else, to see a new culture, to learn a new language. And so that's the true legacy. The book goes to my purpose because what it shows, and like when I moved to Barcelona, the reason I was able to write the book, I journaled every day and I actually shared it publicly. And I shared it publicly because I was trying to let my friends and family know what I was doing. But very soon thereafter, people I didn't know were reading it. And I was reached out to this guy who was moved to Barcelona after the 1992 Olympics because he won the gold medal for kayaking. And he went to Barcelona Olympics and he stayed there. And he goes, "Dave, I'm reading your blog. Would you mind grabbing lunch with me?" This is like my 2nd month there. Yeah. I'm like, would I mind? Of course I'll go to lunch with you. Yeah. So we went out to lunch and he goes, and he was a coach as well. And he goes, "I want to tell you a story." He's like, "When you're younger, you feel like you're on a kayak on a large river and you can turn left, you can turn right, you can turn in any direction, and you have the freedom to go wherever you want. As you get older and until you're midlife, you finally move from being on a kayak to being on like a container ship in a small river where you feel like you're stuck on that course. You can't turn left, you can't turn right, and that's the course you're stuck on for the rest of your life." Yeah. He goes, "But not you. You turned your ship." He goes, "And that's rare. And you need to keep writing about this to inspire other people so they can turn their ships." And that's when I decided I was going to turn that into a book. I didn't think it would take me 5+ years to do, but I realized my legacy is to, like the same as the fast forward mindset, to give people tools and the story to help them take action, take a leap, turn their ships.
So what's the next adventure? What's the next bold step? What's the next expression of freedom for you?
I think, at least in my near term, having twins going to college in 2 different states is going to be, and so we're going from 3 kids in the house to 1. We've never, we had twins first, right? Like we never had just 1 kid. So I am a little confused and excited and concerned about what that life looks like. Our youngest is going to be 5 years living without them here. And so I'm not accepting it, but I'm like, it's a sad feeling of like, when they leave, that's going to be, probably the last time we're all living together and under the same roof, at least in this kind of form.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be as present as possible to see this happening. They're graduating next month. We're in April already. So that's my focus versus like the next big thing. Once they're out and they're there, I'll think next.
Well, it's interesting. It's freedom for them. Freedom, at least to sort of that, the kayak, right? They get their kayaks and they can, turn in the water.
I mean, we're both in our mid 40s. It's like, man, I can't put like college feels like yesterday, but also a lifetime ago. So, when I met my mother-in-law, I was only 3 years older than my oldest son is now. And she was only 2 years older than I am. So I'm like,
yeah, it's come back around. So I just want to sort of, you've been generous with your time. I'm really excited to read the book, honestly, now, because I sort of have this, again, my boys are 3, but I sort of have this family vacation that we had. It was like last year we went and we rented a cabin. We were I like dream about that. Like it was like, that would be my idea of heaven. But at the same time, they're 3 now and they have their own will and whatnot. One of my fears now is like, I don't want them to grow up. I don't want them to go to college. I'm like, well, I'm listening to you say that. And I'm like, I feel like I would be a trembling mess if that was happening to me right now.
Yeah. Well, I think if we didn't have a 3rd one at home, maybe we would be more of a trembling mess or not. But they're also like teenagers who are, I love them dearly, annoying. And I think there is something to that science of like college and getting out and spreading their wings a little bit. But yeah, no, I am not ready for that. But then I think about, most of my life, has been since college, at least. I've been out of college. I've been alive longer out of college than I was in. And my life has been so rich and so amazing. My parents, while we didn't live with them, they were certainly I didn't feel like distant and in another place from them. So it's just the next stage of what we'll do together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to leave you with the last word. We could have talked about so many things, but what is something that maybe we should have discussed and we didn't, or something I should have asked you and we didn't, or what's the last word you want to leave sort of the audience with?
I try to have something unique with each kid that I can do with them, and that's our thing as much as I can. And with my older son, right now we're like both into like going into saunas and sweating it out and doing that. And so that's been like a cool experience. And I don't know, I would say, well, you have twins. So as they get older, I'll say, I'll give my last word to you. When they're younger, it's easier to do them all in the both of them together, because that's what makes life easier. But as they get to an age when they're 5 or 6 and a little bit older, do your best to like go separate with each one and do something overnight with them. And both of you and your partner doing that, I think that will help the whole family. And then when things get too easy, have a 3rd kid. That's what we did. And then when things get too easy with the 3rd kid, get a dog, because that's what we did. So to do anything, I want to make sure you have as much love and much out there. So like, yeah, that's, and when I look back at my life, if I had to see a theme, every 5 years, I tend to make some sort of big change, whether it's having kids, moving to Barcelona, writing a book, running a marathon. So yeah, that's a good sort of blueprint that's been helpful for me.
That's a great reminder. As I mentioned, I had 5 little brothers and we were like right in a row. And so one of the things that is really, I have one I have one, this isn't sort of a sob story, but I have one very like precious memory of me and my dad doing something, just me and him, when I was a kid. Just one. And, I think about it a lot. There's just something, like you said, there's a science or something happens with just our nature, biology, where I remember that because, I don't know how the guy had 6 kids. I don't know how I don't know if he stayed sane. The jury's still out on that, but that really resonates with me because I really want, I guess I want them to have several of those memories,
Yeah. And you will.
So
2 is much easier than 6.
Yes. Yeah, it is. So, David, where can people connect with you online? Where can they get your book, et cetera?
Yeah, so I am very active on LinkedIn. So you can certainly, that's the best way to connect with me. I have the website, 11 Suitcases, that not only tells a little bit more of the story, it also links you to Amazon. So you can take a look at that as well.
Well, I hope the audience can hear it. It's just been an extremely resonant conversation with me. And it's quite serendipitous, the amount of, I don't even think you had to say all the words that you did to get across the meanings and the intentions in your story. And I got them on this side. So I can only hope that translated to our audience here. But I want to thank you for the warm conversation, the wisdom and the insight, and just the reminder that we have the opportunity for freedom, and to make bold choices. And as the gentleman in Barcelona told you, you can turn your ship, right? It might be uncomfortable, but you still can do that. So,
awesome.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it and looking forward to connecting in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David.
Thanks.
David doesn't reduce bold living into a slogan in this episode. There's no fantasy here that every leap is clean, easy, or instantly rewarding. Moving to Barcelona didn't remove the mess of family life. It amplified it. It didn't erase fear. It gave David and his family a chance to practice moving with fear. And that might be the deeper lesson. A meaningful life is not built by waiting until the doubt disappears. It's built by becoming intentional enough that doubt no longer gets the final vote. David's story reminds us that success is not just what we build. It's what we're willing to choose before the window closes. It's the family memory we create instead of the safer excuse. It's the purpose we revisit when the old version no longer feels true enough. It's the willingness to stop only thinking about the life we want and start living it, even imperfectly. And maybe the most powerful line from the entire conversation is the one David received in Barcelona. You can still turn your ship, even if the ship feels large, even if the river feels narrow, even if the life you have built appears too established to change. There may still be more freedom available than you think. You can connect with David on LinkedIn and learn more about his book, 11 Suitcases, at 11suitcases.com. That's 11suitcases.com. The link is in the show notes, of course. Thank you for listening to the Personal Success Podcast. And as always, keep defining and redefining success for yourself.